Thanks, Zico. Great to be here today to talk with you about where's the real value of visibility. Yeah, when we at Descartes think about visibility, it's at the core of our being. And let me share a little bit about myself and then later on also about Descartes. So first, I'm responsible for the transportation management business unit in Descartes, and that means visibility and several transportation management solutions. On the picture you can see, I have to confess, I also went skiing this year. I did it with my Tesla. I hope that makes it a little bit less bad. Actually, one of those is me. You maybe should have a poll to guess who is me. But let's say on the topic of visibility, it's not only important for businesses, but it's also important for personal lives. In almost every activity that we have today, data and getting data and detailed insights is something that we expect, right? If we go exercising, if we order our groceries, if we order something online, we expect to get data and visibility and insight and what's happening, what's going on, when is it arriving, what's the status, etc. That's a development that has been going on for years in, let's say, normal day life and also for companies. Just like who's who for me, right? It's also important to have exact data. For me, it makes a big difference if it's me or my identical twin brother, right? It matters having the right data. Maybe a little bit more also on my background personally. I worked for 14 years at Accenture, advised a lot of large companies, multinationals, on improving their supply chain. After that, I worked a few years at a digital forwarder, so I went to the other side, and now at Descartes, where we help customers with their software solutions. Let's see, today I want to cover 3 topics. So one is a bit of introduction about, okay, what is Descartes actually, what are we doing, how are we helping our customers? The second one is, what are actually the different levels of visibility that we see and what are the challenges that we typically hear from our customers where we want to help to overcome them. And the last part, most important maybe, is to see, okay, how can we overcome them and where can we get actual value from visibility? Because it is a really hot topic, but not everybody, or I would almost say the majority of companies are not yet capitalizing on the opportunity that visibility presents for them. If we look at Descartes, we are a global company, so we have offices around the world. We have 24,000 customers that are also across the world. There's now 2,200 people working at Descartes, and we continue to grow. We have done so for the last 19 years, and we are still growing also in the recent, let's say, turbulent times. Certainly in the market of visibility, there's a lot of developments, influx of new capital, outflux of capital and people for some companies. We are very steady and we continue to grow, and we're very proud of that. The other part, of course, is that we are a software company, so we develop software solutions for the logistics domain, and we invest a lot in our software, right? We continue to grow and make our functionalities more advanced. We are now at around 500 million of revenue, so that's a bit the size that we are. Let's say one of the key assets that Descartes has been developing over the last 20 years is what we call our global logistics network. You could say that's sort of an internet, but then between companies. So we have connected 140,000 companies to our network. And that's not a connection where it's sort of, well, we have one connection, we pull a lot of data from different companies. That's getting real interactive data with those companies, right? So we have communication two-way lines with parcel carriers, with all modalities, right? Ocean liners, etc. We get external data sources. They can be GPS data. It can be customs information that we gather, and we all combine that in our GLN. Just to give a few examples, because we have been around for a longer period of time, if you look at, for example, airlines, there's just a few companies in the world that are allowed and that have multiple direct connections with airlines. And Descartes is the biggest of that. And that's not because we were so smart, but let's say we started that already business 20 years ago. So all the new companies there, they need to go via one of those existing ones. And that's, of course, something that we provide for our customers. Another example for Ocean, we are the only endorsed app partner of SAP doing ocean bookings. So we are the backbone of, let's say, transportation globally. At the bottom of the slide, we do this for our customers, right? And for us, our customers are either shippers. There's just a few brands there, of course, cannot put all 24,000 there, but they're also carriers and forwarders. Having this connectivity, having this network is something that's valuable for shippers, and it's something that's valuable for carriers and forwarders as well. We connect and provide full, let's say, TM solutions or visibility solutions, but we also connect with their existing TM solutions if they already have a certain partner that they want to continue to use. Enough about Descartes, right? Let's now talk a bit more about visibility. What do we mean with that, and how important is it actually? When we look at, let's say, how important it is, we have a yearly benchmark that we do with all kinds of transportation executives or directors to see what matters for you. This year, we already did it in the beginning of 2023. Visibility, again, was one of the key topics, or the #1 topic, where they say we want to improve. The interesting fact is that although they have been saying this for a couple of years, there's also studies showing that only 25% of those executives actually see the real value of visibility. So they really want to invest. They say that for a couple of years, they're eager. There's also a lot of external parties, new companies starting up and offering all kinds of fantastic results. But the shippers and forwarders are not seeing that. Actually, there's some studies that even show that the gap versus what they expect and what they actually get is increasing. So it's not going down, it's getting worse. This is very interesting. I think maybe there's just too much hype and that the expectations are too high. It can also be that vendors give the wrong expectations and that they're not realistic for their customers. I think it's good to structure visibility a little bit because it's an all-purpose word or containerbegrip in Dutch. So when we talk about visibility, we divide it in 4 levels. And level 1 is actually the communication. And it still surprises me that today a lot of companies, big professional companies making a lot of money, they don't organize communication with their LSPs, logistic service providers, in a decent automated way. Just yesterday I was talking with a company. They said, yeah, we do a lot of business in Europe, but we have a shared service center of 100 people interacting with our carriers. And they are calling and emailing. We are in the 21st century, right? So we can automate that, but often it's forgotten. And I think there's a huge opportunity there. So that's what we call level 1. So we do booking, getting invoices, all that sort of stuff, sending VGM, shipping instructions with your carriers. It's being done manually. Level 2 is what we define in ETAs, right? So we can get external data, GPS data. You can have a free app on your phone, have IES data. You can also put it in a tool and then have a smart algorithm say, okay, based on the current location, this is the expected time of arrival of this ocean vessel. You can do the same for road. That's certainly a lot of attention in there. It has added value, and I think a lot of companies are at least involved in doing that, so that's, let's say, positive. Level 3 is where we talk about a bit more about advanced status data, I would say. So there's more data sources like ports and terminals or customs organizations where we can get data and get actual data on what's going on. So beyond, let's say, just a prediction, but having the confirmation from the authority that's actually handling your cargo. The 4th level is the IoT trackers. There's quite some developments over the last years that have become smarter. The batteries have been improved. Let's say the algorithms determining when to send a message and saving energy have gone up. So today there are quite good parcel trackers already, right? They're in a label. If you put it on a parcel, you can track it. You can track more than, of course, just GPS location. You can also track shocks of temperature or other stuff. This is interesting, but it's still sort of expensive, certainly for parcels. So there's only a few companies for which this makes sense, right? If you have really expensive stuff and you want to have an anti-theft insurance, then this type of trackers might be required to do that. Or there's some pharma situations where that could also be a good thing for your business. If we then focus a bit on, okay, so why it's important, we defined a few levels, but we're not seeing the value. What's then keeping companies from not getting that value? So one, as we discussed already a little bit, is level one, let's say the actual communication, using that and automating that with your carriers is often not in place, or it's manual. The second one is also quite interesting. If we talk about ETA, for some modalities, it might sound quite straightforward, right? When there's a truck arriving in a warehouse, there are still some tricks to do to automate that in a proper way, but I will not go into details. But when we look, for example, at an ocean vessel arriving, an ETA is already a little bit of a vague term, because what ETA are we trying to predict? Is it when the vessel is arriving in the port, but is that the moment when your container is actually being offloaded? Or is it when the terminal starts offloading containers? But if there's 25,000 containers on the vessel, when is your container being offloaded? Or is the ETA the moment then that is being offloaded actually by that terminal? Or when the customs declared it free, right? So what's the ETA that we're trying to predict? And when can you actually pick up your container? So you might be very good in predicting when it arrives in the port, but that does not always relate or not easily relate with the time when you can pick up the container. And the next thing is with companies, if they, say, crack this nut, there's another challenge where they say, okay, we know what we mean with ETA, we have all figured it out, but how do you communicate that ETA with your service providers? And how do you make sure that they act? And then they might say, well, we have sort of email notifications, but then for companies doing, I don't know, 100,000 shipments per month, and you have email notifications on ETAs, every shipment sending, whenever an ETA changes, an email notification to your forwarder. Do we really expect them to, let's say, read all the emails and act upon it? So there's a challenge in how do we make sure that we have the right data and that we preferably automatically send it to the partner that's actually picking up, for example, that container. Otherwise, you have data, but no action resulting from that data, right? So then, let's say the added value is very limited. The last point is that we see that a lot of companies today, they have different providers for different parts. So they have one forwarder doing customs, one visibility providing the ETAs, another company maybe doing some communication, or they have their own IT department doing some direct communication. So it gets a bit of a spaghetti of different data models for different types of users, which in the end results in let's say, suboptimal visibility. Let's focus then a bit on what can we do to improve that, and what is a strategy to be better and getting more value from your visibility. So one is having a central, let's say, TMS or data provider where you have all the data from all your carriers, right? So it's the communication. It's also getting the external data sources in one place. It also makes sense if you want to connect new forwarders or new carriers, that you have one party that's, let's say, onboarding them, and you don't have multiple parties saying, yeah, I need your GPS later, yeah, I want to do a booking with you and exchange messages. So it's helpful to simplify that setup and have one party providing that service. The other way around, on the other side of the slide, it's also having that one data source being the trigger for alerting, let's say, the internal users, and then doing the communication with the externals, right? So that you don't have different systems for different types of users, and in that sense, run the risk of having different alerts for different people. If you set it up, then there's several benefits that you can create from this setup. So one is that if you have the automated connectivity, that reduces, let's say, the need for emailing and calling, and hopefully a shared service center of 100 FTE is no longer required, or at least should be maybe a little bit less people. So that's one, it's just a saving of work. The other is if you have one combined data model, it's much easier to use the different data sources that you get, right? If it's from a forwarder or carrier or from AIS data, and apply logic and intelligence on, let's say, a combined set of data. So your data quality goes up. The third part is, well, if you have indeed that one provider, then if you change your landscape, which typically companies do quite often, change forwarders, change carriers, it's easier to connect with new parties, because you have only one party that needs to onboard this new party, not, let's say, different ones. The other thing is that if you have all the data in one place and there's new regulations, for example, now with sustainability becoming more and more important and we need to report on emissions, all the data that's required to calculate and estimate your sustainability data is there. You have it in one place, right? While if you're working with, let's say, a party who's only looking at one part of the pie, then you're missing data. You cannot really provide the best possible estimate on your emissions. If we zoom in, and I just have an example of a 3-leg ocean shipment, right? So where we do first a bit with a truck, then a ship, and then a truck. You can see that the data and the status that you get from the different levels is quite complex, and this is highly simplified, right? In practice, there's much more status data there. They're different from different carriers, they're different from ports and terminals. So if you have all that data and you have then different providers getting the data, and then they're sending it to different users, you're sure that it will be a mess. So it's the ideal setup is we have this data and get it into one system where you can at least apply the same logic to all of that data, right? And the data at level 1, so it starts with the booking or VGM really in the beginning. And then of course there's status data coming back from carriers. Then there's ETA data from them. Then you might have a party who's doing also some ETA calculation. You need to ideally look at those both and compare and see how they match. Of course, carriers are also improving their ETA predictions, right? So it's not that what was bad last month is per se bad this month. So there's a dynamic in there. On level 3, you can get more data from different sources, like I said, like customs, ports, and terminals. So you can use that as well in one data set. So just to summarize my story for today, I think we concluded visibility is a hot topic. There's lots of value to be gained from it. We heard before Jamal and David talk about the supply chain need to be resilient and adaptive. I think having the right data and interaction, preferably automatic with your carriers or forwarders, is crucial to be really resilient. Or you need to invest a lot in shared service centers with people calling, etc. But I don't think that's the ideal scalable solution. So it is really important. But you need to think about, okay, so what actually is the data that I need? What's the ETA that really matters for me, and how do I determine that? The other is, okay, how do I communicate it with different users, let's say, in my own organization and with my forwarders, right? Because if I have data, might be fully correct, your ETA, but if it's not preferably automatically communicated with the forwarder, he's not acting upon it, then what's the value of that data? If they're not picking up that container at your designated time, but they're just waiting, or they based it on an ETA from 3 weeks ago. Well, I think a lot has to do with how is your technology landscape set up? How do you organize your TMS or your data provider? How do you have one data model? And how do you make sure that all those different stages from those different levels that I described, that are used in a harmonized way for your business, right? And I think that's maybe food for thought on how is your company organizing that? Have you not forgotten somewhere, is there a team calling and emailing all the time, something that you can automate? That's it from me for today. Thanks a lot for your attention, and of course, we're happy to discuss further about visibility or related solutions. So if you are interested, please visit us at the first floor. Thank you.